It's where 5:30, that's when pregame happens, and we're happy to have with us right now, and for the first time I get to say this, Hall of Fame broadcaster Tom Hamilton joining us here on the Kenny and JT Show.
Amen, brother.
Thank you, guys. Not there yet, though. They can still change their mind. So, don't want to put the cart before the horse.
But, Hammy, this is the first time we've had a chance to talk to you since that was announced. It's so well-deserved. You've been a part of Indians, Tribe, Guardians baseball all these years, and when there were bad teams, the one thing we could count on was a great broadcast night in and night out. So congratulations. Just for our listeners, when you got the message that you're going to go in July, what's it mean to you?
Well, it's still surreal, Kenny and JT. I mean, and it's hard to even talk about it. I'm Irish, so we cry at commercials. But I just, look, we know how blessed we've been and how fortunate we are to get this job. The greatest phone call I ever got was personally, career-wise, not with kids or anything else, but January of 1990 when you get hired. And you've won the lottery when you get a job in the major leagues. And for us, it was even like we won the lottery twice because Cleveland was where we wanted to come. And it kept my wife from Pittsburgh and myself from Wisconsin midway between our families, and to raise our 4 children here, we have been so fortunate. And in this business, to be anywhere for 36 years, you have to have great people that employ you. First it was the Jacobs family, now the Dolan family, and all the people that have made this job possible for me, and now my current boss, Curtis Danberg, and before that it was Dennis Lehman and Jeff, there are so many people. You don't have enough time to thank everybody. And so, again, it's just, it's surreal. And I'm glad the season's here because I can focus on the games.
Tom, all due respect, we're the fortunate ones because we have the opportunity to listen to you call games. More importantly, on the Kenny and JT Show, every night there's a great call. We get the opportunity to play the replay the following day on our program, and it makes us sound so much better. So thank you for that. And also, we're also fortunate because we grew up and we still work a stone throw away from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And they instituted a deal with us to whereas every week we get another Pro Football Hall of Famer. It's called a residency program where they bring another Pro Football Hall of Famer every week. So last week we had Dick Vermeil. This week, we get a baseball Hall of Famer, and I couldn't be happier to have Tom Hamilton with us right now because it means the world to us, and we're so happy to be back in baseball season.
Well, thanks, JT. Yeah, I mean, look how lucky all of us are. We're all doing something we enjoy doing, and you tell your children, whatever it is, just have a passion. And if you can find something that you have a passion for and you're lucky enough to make that a career, then you're really blessed because, I come from a farm family out of Wisconsin, and when we were 13, sold the farm, moved into a little town. My dad worked at a printing company. Those were the people that worked. And those people are still working all across Ohio, and I'm not working. This is a labor of love, so I appreciate the kind words, but we're also grateful for the people of Northeast Ohio because people here care. And there's nothing better than they may hate you some days, they may love you other days, but at least they care.
You'll never get the apathy.
No.
That's the thing. They're going to bitch about bad teams. They're going to love the good teams, but they're always going to be there.
And you're going to get a lot of letters in crayon, and those aren't going to end well.
Tom Hamilton, our guest here on the Kenny and JT Show. When is the Hall of Fame ceremony for you, Tom?
The last Saturday in July. I should know that. I think it's July 25th.
Okay.
But the last weekend in July, and the induction for me is that Saturday for the players, and that's what the Hall of Fame is about. It's about the players. CeCe going in, and the other guys, Shohei Ohtani. He will someday, but Ichiro Suzuki, the first Japanese-born player to ever go into Cooperstown, which makes it historical from that standpoint. And it's so awesome that CeCe is going in, and so it's they go in on Sunday.
Yeah, for me, Tom, and you mentioned the players, kids look up to them as their idols, right? I grew up in Pittsburgh. My idol was Bob Prince.
Yep.
Okay, the gunner. And his photos outside here in the hallway. One of the greatest play-by-play guys ever. Kiss it goodbye, bug on the rug, chicken on the hill with Will. All those, catchphrases were for him. So I grew up listening to him, and then I come to Cleveland and start my professional career 2 years after you started yours, and I've had the chance to listen to you. So I've been blessed to hear some of the great play-by-play calls from baseball radio guys. I'm curious, who was your idol maybe growing up?
I think, again, it's a byproduct, just what you talked about, Kenny, where you grew up. I grew up, in Wisconsin, and so until the 66 season, the Milwaukee Braves left in 1965, moved to Atlanta. So for me, I was a little kid listening on a porch on a dairy farm, literally at night with a transistor radio to Earl Gillespie and Blaine Walsh, and the exploits of Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews and Joe Torre and Warren Spahn and Lou Burdett, and some great Milwaukee teams that went to back-to-back World Series, then moved to Atlanta. And then when the Brewers were bought as the Seattle Pilots by Bud Selig, after the Braves have left starting in 66, then the Seattle Pilots, of whom Mike Keegan played for.
That's right.
Then were an expansion team in 69. They were bought by Bud Selig at the end of spring training. Mike tells the story. They had 2 equipment trucks packed, and one was either going to Seattle and the other was going to Milwaukee. They didn't know where they were going. And so then that team initially had Merle Harmon, who was on the radio call for the New York Jets when Joe Willie Namath won the Super Bowl.
Wow.
And Merle Harmon was a phenomenal broadcaster. So I got to listen to some really top-notch people. Earl Gillespie, Merle Harmon, Eddie Doucette with the Milwaukee Bucks, who came up with, so many of the things that we now hear in the NBA. Gary Bender was in Madison, who later became a CBS broadcaster. So I was really fortunate to listen to those kind of people growing up.
Tom, when we come up, our eyes are everywhere. We're watching the different rooms and the different broadcast teams that come in. Some are former players, some aren't. Some are guys we know, some are guys we don't know. And we also watch you and Rosie quite a bit. And it's interesting for me because when I see you talking to these other broadcasters, we know what goes on because Kenny and I do the same thing with other broadcasters that are up here that we know. You mentioned growing up in Wisconsin. You mentioned the Brewers. You can't mention the Brewers without talking about Bob Uecker.
Well, he was another guy that obviously we listened to, but JT, actually it was somebody I had to be careful. We all wanted to emulate Bob. And you hear about how many kids tried to sound like Vin Scully that grew up on the West Coast. Right. And Bob had such a great home run call, get up, get out of here, gone for Benji. And those were the days of Harvey's Wallbangers and Bambi's Bombers and Robin Yount and Paul Molitor and Cecil Cooper and Ben Ogilvy and Gorman Thomas. And, they went to the 82 World Series, and it was hard not to emulate a guy like Bob Uecker. And that's when you learn in the minor leagues or when you're doing high school games or whatnot, you better figure out a style because you're sure not as good as that guy, and people will notice right away that you're copying somebody. And so, and Bob was so good to me. He was a Milwaukee native, and, I've said it and I'll say it again. He is the greatest figure, sports, human, whatever.
He was on a Tonight Show.
But I mean,
numerous times.
For the state of Wisconsin, he's the biggest loss ever. Okay. Whether it's a state senator, whether he had been president, whether humanitarian.
He was the ambassador for the state, was he?
He was, and never left Milwaukee. Now, he had a home at Scottsdale. Obviously, he got tired of Milwaukee winters, too. And but never wanted to leave Milwaukee, and stayed with the Brewers right until the end. And, we were so lucky. And, guys, if you think he was funny in Major League or on television, in real life, in fact, you always had to look around when you'd go and visit Bob, be it spring training or Major League games during the regular season, because you'd be laughing so hard at such inappropriate stories, but that you would get fired for laughing. Bob wasn't going to get fired for telling the story. He was incredible, and he was so kind to me. And, when I started in 1990, I was afraid of Herb. Herb was an icon in Cleveland, and he was so good to me. And then you're meeting all these guys that, whether it's Bob Uecker, whether it's Ernie Harwell, whether it's Vin Scully, those were the people that, to me, were bigger than life.
Yeah, that's great. Now, true story or not, Tom Hamilton, I want to know this, because I heard this story. Maybe it was you telling it when we were on one of the bus tours many years ago, but about Herbie, all right? Heineken, is that the only beer that Herb would drink?
Yep.
And you guys...
After a ball game, my first spring training game, we were in Scottsdale. First game, of course, back then we were the only team at Tucson, so every road game was a 2.5 hour trip. I'm as nervous as you can be. Your first game in the big leagues, even though it's spring training. We drive from Tucson to Scottsdale to play the Giants, listening to Frank Sinatra for 2.5 hours, and do the ball game. And being from Wisconsin, I'd love to have a beer before I got back in that car, but I don't know Herb. I don't want to say anything. And Herb goes, you know what? This went well. And he goes, take the stuff back to the car. I'll get us each a beer. We'll sit here on this picnic table, have a beer, relax a little bit, and then we'll get back in the car. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is going to work. Herb likes beer. And I'm from Wisconsin, so that's a given. And I go to the car, put everything away. Herb comes back empty-handed, and he says, well, let's go. And I go, oh, shoot, they were out of beer. And he goes, yep, all they had was Miller Lite. And so for Herb, that didn't count. We're not drinking Miller Lite. Oh. So as I've said, that's the first time Herb saw me cry. But he was so good to me. And, the reason we made it here in Cleveland, and I say we, I mean my wife Wendy and I, is how good Herb and Nancy were to us. And because they accepted you, the audience accepted you. And, the gravitas that Herb had in this city, we would go out to dinner with them in the off season. They were like royalty. When they walked into a room, heads turned. Some people are just regal, and that's the way Herb and Nancy were. But they never acted that way, and they were so kind to us.
Well, that's awesome. Happy to have with us Tom Hamilton, Hall of Fame broadcaster. How lucky are we? We get to listen to he and Rosie each and every time the Guardians play on WHBC. And I've got to ask about your current partner then, too, because on the Hammy, the description on the radio of the game is outstanding, but some of our favorite parts are the back and forth that you and Rosie have.
It's not a back and forth.
No, that's true. It is a one-way conversation. Just your relationship with Rosie.
I've been, again, so blessed to have this job, but you couldn't have a better partner than Rosie, and I really mean that, because we're good friends. It's somebody you trust. It's somebody you're never concerned about that they have an agenda. And look, you're with your partner more than you're with your family from the time you get to spring training until whenever the season ends. So, again, I am so grateful for that friendship and that partnership, and it is a partnership. As I've told Rosie, this is not a soliloquy. This is both of us, and it needs to be that way. And, if you can't have fun, guys, we're not splitting atoms. We're not saving lives. We're not teaching children. We're getting to watch baseball. You better enjoy this and have fun with it.
And you guys do, and it comes across on the radio. All right, so let's talk about this year's team. Here we are during this, broadcast. They're riding a 4-game winning streak. They beat the Yankees last night. The Big Rig, an outstanding start. Manzardo, 3 games in a row. Hosey, I heard you, call his home run yesterday. Finally gets another one. This team's playing good baseball right now after a tough start on the left coast.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to starting pitching, Kenny. This club is 10-3 after the start you talked about, and it comes down to starting pitching. The rotation is averaging almost 6 innings a start over the 13 games with an ERA of about 2.70. Well, that's going to keep you in a lot of games, especially with this bullpen.
Right.
Because, tonight, we'll be very thin in the bullpen again. That's why it was so important what Gavin Williams did last night. Tanner Bivey's got to do the same thing here tonight. But it starts with starting pitching. I'm still flabbergasted what the club accomplished last year, considering how decimated they were with starting pitching. But I also think we're playing better baseball. The defense has been really good. We're doing the little things again. They lead the major leagues in sacrifice flies. And, guys, I mean, when you have Jose Ramirez, you have, in my mind, one of the guys on Mount Rushmore. When you talk about the most important pieces to a franchise in the game right now,
Right.
he's there with Aaron Judge. He's there with Bobby Witt Jr. I mean, those guys are irreplaceable. And so, they're starting to forge their own identity. It's still a young club. Guys, I can't wait to see Will Wilson. I think Will Wilson's going to help this club. Brought up today, they put Lane Thomas on the injured list. Had a great spring, former first-round pick that I don't know why the Giants gave up on him. He was hitting, 350 in Columbus. You'll see him in the lineup tomorrow against a left-hander. And so you still have some new young pieces here, and you're still forging that identity. But the way they're playing now really is encouraging. And let's face it, every game against the Yankees just has a different feel to it, doesn't it?
Sure does.
It means more. It just does.
It does.
Tom, it was such a magical run last year coming into the season, and in the offseason changes that they made. You might look at a team like this, say they're still young. Can they reduplicate what they did or duplicate what they did last year? Don't know if that's the case or not. But we do know last year they started off on fire, and they rode that wave all the way to the end of the season. Well, this year it's different, but it seems as though they're coming around. How are they getting it done?
Well, I think it goes right now back to the starting pitching, JT. That's keeping you in games. They're going to have to figure some things out in the bullpen. I mean, you knew it had to come down to Aaron Judge and Cade Smith last night in the ninth inning, and Cade Smith proved that, okay, they've got more than one guy that can close games here. I think a lot of it is dependent on the young kids continuing to improve. Kyle Manzardo, who saw this coming?
Not me.
Not with this kind of power this early. Look, Stephen Kwan now is a star.
Right.
I think in year 4, he's proven he is a bona fide star. There's not a better leadoff hitter in the game. There's not a better defensive left fielder in the game. And now, can you get a few more of these younger players? Gabriel Arias is playing well. Guys are getting a chance, and it's time to capitalize on it. And, we've got some other kids coming, and so I sure would love, and I know it sounds like wishful thinking, but I would love to see what a Chase DeLauder could do if he could ever get healthy.
Yeah, that we see him when he's healthy, the connections he makes with the baseball and how far it goes, right?
Special.
Yeah, it is. So, we always talk about what's the best ability, Tom. It's availability.
Yep.
And unfortunately, he hasn't been available yet.
But if Angel Martinez ends up being the next Stephen Kwan, you might not have to worry about that ever.
You know what? You can't have enough good hitting. And I think the one thing that he brings and some of these other kids are starting to bring, come October, you've got to have somebody that can beat you with a long ball. That's what eliminated Cleveland last year. Stanton and Soto had 7 home runs against Cleveland last October, and Aaron Judge added 2. Now, look, Cleveland doesn't have that kind of firepower, but you in October are not going to bunch together 4 base hits and score a couple of runs. The pitching's too good. All you have to do is look at the games we won in Detroit, or start the playoffs. Lane Thomas, grand slam.
Right.
Okay. David Fry off the bench in game 4. And then the next day, Lane Thomas against Skubal. Actually, I think it was David Fry in game 1 that had the big blow. But you know what I mean. John Kenzie Noel against Luke Weaver, and then David Fry with the walk-off homer against the Yankees. You have to have that kind of ability to change a game with one swing of the bat come October.
And that's where a Chase DeLauder could be a big factor, right?
And again, he's young.
Yeah.
And so maybe at some point, I just, you just don't want this to turn into a different sport. But I think of what Sam Bowie might have been, when you think of his career at Kentucky and then, Portland picked him over Michael Jordan.
Right.
They're still hearing about that.
No doubt. Tom Hamilton, our guest. Happy to have Hammy with us. You'll hear more this evening. 6:10 first pitch, around that time between the Yankees and the Guardians. And Hammy, before we let you get out of here and do your real job, I'm just curious for you, over the years, do you have a favorite game Is there one that stands out above all the games that you've done? And I don't know how many that is.
Yeah, I mean, the first one always is because you can't believe you got here. And, of course, got snowed out in the fourth inning. So, welcome to Lake Erie and Municipal Stadium. Gosh, guys, it is so hard to pick just one. I mean, and I've said this before, there's nothing more magical than Game 7 of the World Series. I've been a part of 2 of them. And, the Rajay Davis moment here against the Chicago Cubs and Aroldis Chapman was one of those that you'll take to your grave. But, gosh, I mean, to pick one game in particular, it would really be hard to do that. Again, that's what I try to tell people. Do you know how spoiled we are? Since 1995, we've been in the playoffs, it's either 12 times. I believe 12 or 13 times since 95. That's a lot of special moments in October.
It really is. And I go back when I was at KNR, I got to do the post-game show, right? And Pena's home run against the Red Sox.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm looking out at the left field home run porch, and then in between here and what's Rocket Arena now, we did our show till like 4 in the morning that night because of how late it was.
Right.
But to your point, there have been so many iconic moments like that. Obviously, just shy of winning the World Series, it really would have put the icing on top, or the cherry on top of the sundae icing on the cake. But there have been so many great, and you've got to call a lot of those great moments.
I didn't make the call, but I still think one of the most special moments ever, Herb was on the call, and it's Game 6 in the Kingdome where you're like, how are we beating the unbeatable Randy Johnson?
Right.
And Kenny Lofton scores from second base on a passed ball?
Right.
That's one where you're like, only Kenny Lofton could have the guts and the ability to do that, and you knew you were going to the World Series for the first time since 1954, and that capped off the most magical season I think any of us have ever seen in 1995 because of the way that club bludgeoned teams, 27 last-at-bat wins, and who knows, may have won the World Series if Joe Brinkman had called in sick for Game 6.
Yeah, that strike zone was as wide as the Grand Canyon for the Braves pitchers, and it seemed to shrink for El Presidente.
At least we're not bitter.
No, not at all. I've heard Albert mention a few things about that, too, over the years, about that strike zone and everything. But it's been a magical run, and it continues with you.
Yeah,
and we hope you do it for many more years because we love listening to Hall of Famer Tom Hamilton call the Guardians games.
Kenny, JT, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Great to be with you guys.
Enjoy Cooperstown, all right?
Thank you.
There he is. He's a legend right there. The man, the myth, the legend, Tom Hamilton, Hall of Famer, joining us.